Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into perfectly polished boots and crisply pressed uniforms, into a world where posture is power and folding your socks is practically a military operation. That's right, we're opening the Etiquette manual of WWII officers. You probably wouldn't survive the first inspection, most people wouldn't. And not because of the bullets, but because your belt buckle isn't shiny enough. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is on your end. Always love seeing the global roll call. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the barracks, and the first thing you notice isn't the beds or the other young men already standing at attention. It's the silence. Not because there's nothing happening. There's the faint rustle of canvas, boots scraping against concrete, someone coughing into their sleeve, but because everyone's afraid to speak. You are too. You're afraid that if you say the wrong thing or move the wrong way, someone will mark it down in a little black book you'll never get to read. Your duffel bag hits the floor. A corporal with a face like it was carved from granite immediately points at it. "Fold that properly," he says, even if it's just hitting the ground. You're not sure if he's serious, but he doesn't blink. So you pick up the bag and gently place it next to your bunk. Parallel, not diagonal, and definitely not touching anyone else's space. Apparently, even geography is governed by decorum now. They hand you a manual. It's slim, battered at the corners, with a title that sounds more like a joke than a threat. The Officer's Guide to Military Conduct and Social Manners. But there's no laughter in the room, just the synchronized turning of pages. This, you quickly learn, is your Bible. And Chapter 1? Uniform Presentation. You are not, as it turns out, just folding clothes. You are folding tradition, respect, and something called presentation of martial dignity. Every seam must be creased. Every button must gleam like the eyes of a suspicious superior. And socks. Oh, the socks. They must be folded into tight, respectful little rectangles. No stuffing, no rolling. This is not laundry. This is ritual. One sergeant claims a misplaced collar tab once got a man reassigned to latrine duty for a month. Another swears that a general once refused to address an officer whose bootlaces were tied in a civilian style. Historians still debate whether that general was eccentric or simply enforcing unspoken codes passed down since the Napoleonic Wars. Either way, you tie your laces with trembling hands. They even teach you how to hang your coat. It must face a certain way, with the insignia visible, so that in case of emergency, someone can identify your rank at a glance. Yes, even if you're unconscious, the coat speaks for you when you can't. The oddest thing? It starts to work. After a few days, your fingers remember the folds. Your eyes twitch at crooked creases. You spot a speck of lint on another cadet's shoulder, and your body itches until it's gone. You've become the very thing you feared, a stickler, a human ruler. One night, someone uses the wrong hanger, and 5 of you gasp like someone spilled state secrets. But it's not just about appearances, or so they say. There's a psychological logic behind it all. You control the little things. One captain says over a lunch you're not allowed to eat until the fork is correctly positioned, so that the big things don't destroy you. It sounds profound or manipulative, depends on how hungry you are. There's even a designated uniform folding drill every Thursday. A full hour of matching cuffs, sharpening pleats, and judging each other's handiwork. The reward for perfection? A nod. The punishment for failure? Push-ups. And the creeping suspicion that your future may involve more latrines than medals. You once saw a lieutenant get chewed out because his hat had a faint smudge. Barely visible, but enough to make a colonel pause, sigh, and mutter, "Disgraceful." That hat, you later find out, had been blown off in a training exercise involving simulated artillery. But decorum, like gravity, shows no mercy. And here's where it gets weird. There's a myth. Okay, maybe it's more of a joke, maybe not. That one guy folded his socks so well during an inspection that a visiting general offered him a position as his aide on the spot. No one remembers his name, or if it ever really happened, but the story persists. A fabled sock-folding promotion. You secretly hope to be next. To an outsider, this all seems absurd, but inside these walls, it becomes your language. A way of saying, I care, I belong, I'm trying not to get yelled at. And soon, you're judging new recruits by the angle of their shirt collars and whether their brass has that regulation polish or the sad gleam of desperation. You start to realize something else. This isn't just about making you neat. It's about making you predictable. In a world that's about to hurl you into unpredictable chaos, the ritual of folding, cleaning, adjusting, it becomes a kind of armor. You can't stop bullets, but you can make sure your cuffs are 3 inches from your wrist, as outlined on page 12. Subsection B. One night, while lying stiff in your bunk because the bed is tucked too tightly to move under the blanket, you wonder aloud, why do we even need to fold socks like this? From the other side of the room, someone whispers, because one day, someone might die, and it'll matter that we were the kind of men who folded our socks. You laugh softly, but you also never fold them wrong again. You're standing in the courtyard under the blazing afternoon sun, already regretting everything about your existence, when the training officer barks your name. Salute, he says. You do, or at least you think you do. And that's when you learn there's no such thing as just saluting. Apparently, there's a precise arc your arm is supposed to follow. An exact position for your palm, facing forward, not down like you're trying to hail a taxi. And your fingertips should just graze the edge of your brow, not jab your eye like the recruit 2 spots down from you just did. He's now being re-educated with push-ups, loud ones. You think the enemy salutes like that? The sergeant yells. You have no idea what the enemy's saluting etiquette looks like, but you doubt they're watching this courtyard in rural England with binoculars and a clipboard. Saluting, you discover, is more than courtesy. It's theater. You're not just acknowledging a superior officer. You're reinforcing the whole hierarchy, the scaffolding of military society. And if you mess it up, it's like tripping on stage during a Shakespeare monologue. Everyone sees it, and no one ever forgets. They drill it into you, when to salute, when not to. Indoors? Usually no. Outdoors? Yes. Unless you're carrying something, unless it's raining and the officer is carrying something, in which case maybe a nod will do. But only if the nod is dignified and practiced. Not that weird twitch you accidentally did yesterday. Oh, and you don't salute when you're in the latrine? One poor soul learned that the hard way. History books don't mention it, but the entire platoon does. What's even more confusing is the politics of eye contact. Too much, and you're challenging authority. Too little, and you seem unsure. Like trying to talk to your girlfriend's father. One corporal jokes, except he has the power to make you march through mud until your toenails revolt. Some historians still debate where this elaborate saluting culture began. Was it the Roman salute, the knight lifting his visor to show his face? Or was it, as some argue, just a way to keep nervous soldiers from fiddling with their uniforms? Either way, in this camp, it's sacred. You practice every day. It becomes a rhythm. March, halt, salute, pivot, salute again. Your elbow becomes a compass. Your wrist develops muscle memory. You catch yourself saluting birds, lampposts, and one time, a particularly aggressive statue. But not all salutes are equal. There's the quick one, the yes sir, moving on salute. There's the ceremonial salute, full of crisp precision. And then there's the accidental salute you give to a cook in a white apron, because from the corner of your eye, he looked like a captain. You spend a week wondering if he told anyone. He didn't. But he did give you extra potatoes. Maybe that's a promotion. Then comes the test, the saluting gauntlet. Or they line up officers from various branches along a corridor, and you have to walk through and greet them correctly. Rank, timing, the works. If you get one wrong, you go back to the beginning. It's like a military version of Simon Says, except the punishment is 30 minutes of running laps with your rifle held above your head. You learn quickly. You also learn the unspoken layers, the side eyes. Not every officer returns your salute with the same energy. Some barely glance. Others nod like you're their long-lost nephew. And there's always one who locks eyes just long enough to make you question your entire posture. Did you flinch? Was your wrist crooked? Was it too enthusiastic? You salute with your soul, a veteran tells you during a break, lighting a cigarette with hands that have definitely seen too many wars. Not too much, just enough to say, I see you, I respect you, but I am not your doormat. The manual backs that up, sort of. It advises confidence without arrogance, respect without submission. Easier said than done when the lieutenant you're saluting looks like he flosses with barbed wire and eats raw thunder for breakfast. There's one day in the middle of your 4th week when the commandant visits. The entire camp is tense. The grass has been trimmed to within regulation length. Even the pigeons seem to be standing straighter. You line up with the others. He walks past. You salute. Clean, perfect, textbook. And he doesn't even glance at you, but someone behind him does. A major. He nods subtly. You hold that nod like a medal in your chest for the rest of the week. There's also this odd myth passed between recruits about a guy who saluted so elegantly during a ceasefire meeting that a German officer actually complimented him before shaking his hand. No one knows his name. Some say it never happened. Others swear it did. And the salute? Supposedly so beautiful, it made a hardened general tear up. You want that. Not the tears, okay, maybe the tears, but the idea that a gesture that lasts 2 seconds could hold years of training, belief, pride. Eventually you find your rhythm. You salute without thinking, without blinking. You salute in dreams. And when you accidentally salute a goat that wandered onto the range during target practice, no one even laughs. Because honestly, you nailed it. And in that strange way only military life allows, the absurd becomes sacred. You stop questioning the ceremony and start inhabiting it. You are not just a person anymore. You're an officer-shaped silhouette with a salute for every occasion and a face that can say, "Yes, sir," in 12 distinct emotional tones. Your mother writes to ask how things are going. You tell her the truth. You've never felt more rigid or more precise. You sit down at a long, polished table, heart pounding louder than the clatter of utensils, surrounded by other cadets who all seem to know which fork is which and when to breathe. The room is oddly formal for a place that's been echoing with drills and shouting for weeks. There's no mud on the floor. No rifles in sight, just candlelight, porcelain plates, and attention so thick you could butter it and serve it with tea. Tonight is your first mess dinner, and you've been warned. This isn't just a meal, it's a test. You glance down at your place setting. There are 3 forks. 3. You don't even own 3 forks at home. There's also a spoon that looks too small to accomplish anything useful. And a knife so dainty, it might be used to politely interrogate a tomato. "Outside in," whispers the cadet to your left. You nod like you already knew that. Outside in. Salad, then entree, then something else. You're not sure what that 3rd course is, but you pray it's something that doesn't require specialized cutlery, like soup or an ancient sea creature. The meal begins, and it becomes immediately clear that this is not about food. It's about control. You're supposed to sit straight, but not stiff. Napkin on your lap, not tucked into your collar, as Private Henderson just found out the hard way. When the colonel raised his eyebrows at him, it was like watching a cannon being silently aimed. You've never seen a napkin removed so fast. You reach for your water glass. Wrong hand. That's your bread plate. Now your bread roll has a fingerprint. You try to smooth it out with your thumb like it never happened. Across the table, someone sneezes and instinctively says, "Sorry." The table goes silent. The rule is clear. You only speak when spoken to, unless you're proposing a toast. And no one here is brave or foolish enough to toast anything except maybe their own survival. There's an old British rule that if you drop your fork, you must not retrieve it yourself. A steward will bring you another. That would be great if there were stewards. Here, you just freeze and pray no one saw. You once heard a rumor about a young officer who dropped his knife during a dinner with the king and fainted from the shame. Historians argue about whether it's true or a cautionary tale invented by cutlery manufacturers. You take your first bite of food. It's actually good. Roasted chicken, seasoned potatoes, a vegetable that may have once been green, but you're too busy counting the chews in your head to enjoy it. 5 chews before swallowing? 7. You don't know. You just know that gulping is frowned upon, and sighing is considered socially aggressive. There are rules about what to say if you must excuse yourself from the table. Excuse me is insufficient. It must be, with your permission, I shall briefly absent myself. And it must be directed to the senior officer at the table. Private Mitchell forgot this last week and is still on dish duty. The colonel at the head of the table lifts his glass. Everyone follows. A toast. You rise precisely 3 seconds after he does. No sooner, no later. You hold your glass at chest level, not too high. This isn't a wedding. He speaks to those who serve. You echo it in unison. Not one person drinks before he does. It's choreographed, reverent, like a ritual passed down from military Olympus. Then there's the wine. Oh, the wine. A cheap red, but we swirl it like it's rare and ancient. No slurping, no sniffing with your nose in the glass. You tip it gently, as if whispering your approval. You pretend you taste berries. You definitely taste fair. The strangest rule of all? If you spill something, you must never ever draw attention to it. Not with apologies, not with napkin acrobatics. You simply carry on. A waterfall of gravy could be dripping down your lap, and the correct response is stoic indifference. Why all this? The manual says it's to prepare you for interactions with high-ranking officials, diplomats, and foreign dignitaries, which sounds noble, until you realize it's also to prevent you from embarrassing your country with your barbaric table habits. One section of the manual states, "An officer's conduct at dinner reflects his discipline in combat," which seems like a stretch, unless the enemy is planning to defeat you with a surprise 7-course meal and deeply judgmental stares. And yet, some part of you gets it. War may be chaos, but this is order. Measured, graceful, structured. A performance of civilization. It's less about food and more about proving you can follow rules even when no bullets are flying. You look up and catch the eye of the sergeant major. He gives you the slightest nod. Your fork selection was correct. You feel oddly victorious, as if you just conquered a small country with impeccable manners. Then it happens. You sneeze. Panic. Instinct says, "Excuse me," but your mouth locks. Your eyes dart. You glance at the senior officer. He says nothing. The silence stretches. Then, softly, almost imperceptibly, he raises his glass, an unspoken signal that all is forgiven. You nod. Crisis averted, for now. At the end of the meal, someone proposes a toast to the cooks. That's allowed. Barely. The colonel smiles. A real one. That's the biggest reward of the night. Not the food, not the wine, but that moment where a rigid face softens. You file out of the dining hall like you're leaving a battlefield. No casualties, just dented egos and one broken bread plate. Back in the barracks, someone dares to say it. Honestly, I think we'd have an easier time storming the beaches than surviving another one of those dinners. You all laugh. Quietly, of course. You sit on your bunk late at night, legs aching from drills, fingers still remembering the shape of the soup spoon, and stomach full of something resembling chicken, but your mind is on the letter in your lap. It's your 3rd attempt tonight. The first one sounded too sentimental. The second, too cold. The third one, maybe just right. There's an entire chapter in the manual, tucked between chapters on appropriate footwear for formal marches and how to decline a cigarette with grace. called correspondence etiquette. And no, it's not optional. You're expected to write home, but not just write. You must do it properly. Proper penmanship, proper tone, proper paper. Your letters should uplift morale without alarming the recipient. In other words, tell your mother you're safe, even when you're not. You dip your pen, careful not to smudge. The ink is too thick and smells vaguely of iron. The paper? Too thin, like it might disintegrate with the wrong word. Every stroke you make feels like it's being watched, because technically, it is. You're not just writing to your loved ones. You're also writing to the censorship office. It's nothing personal. At least that's what they say. But you know that every letter is opened, read, and occasionally blacked out. Private Langley once wrote to his sister about the cold and ended up with a 2-line reply and a red mark on his emotional stability log. You try to be clever. You say you're enjoying the bracing weather instead of, I can't feel my toes. You write that the food is dependable instead of, I fear the potatoes have developed a soul. And when you want to say, I'm scared, you write, we're all in good spirits. There's an art to it, a dance, and some cadets get very good. One man in your unit, Davenport, always grinning, can describe a trench like it's a rustic country inn. Slept under a starlit ceiling last night alongside some lively wildlife, he once wrote. The censor left it untouched. His mother apparently framed it. You learn to address letters precisely. Rank, unit, APO, everything in its place. A missing detail could mean weeks of delay, or your letter vanishing entirely into the bureaucratic void, never to be seen again. And here's a curious bit of etiquette. No perfume allowed. Officers' letters must be unscented. Apparently, a colonel once declared it undermined masculine presentation. Historians still argue whether that rule was enforced army-wide or just a product of one man's tragic love affair with lavender. You also learn never to seal your envelopes with a kiss. That's frowned upon, which makes the letter you just received even more dangerous. It smells like lilac. You found it on your pillow this morning. No return address. Just delicate, swirled handwriting that knows your full name and begins with, I saw you salute the colonel with the wrong hand last Tuesday. It was adorable. You have no idea who sent it. You read it a dozen times. It's playful, flirty, slightly alarming. It references the food. Tell the cook to go easy on the beets. And your awkward marching posture. It ends with, looking forward to seeing you fall on your face again. Fondly, see. You show it to no one. You burn it that night, just in case the censors come looking. But it stays in your mind for weeks. Back to your own letter. You finish it with a simple line. Please don't worry. I'm doing what I was trained to do, and I promise to keep my socks folded and my chin up. You sign your name with a slight flourish, then pause. Do you mention the dream you had? The one where you walked through the officer's mess wearing only your hat? Probably not. You seal the envelope and walk it to the mail drop, passing 2 guards who are pretending not to freeze. One of them offers you a nod. The other coughs and mutters, tell your girl she's lucky. You smile, unsure what they mean. You're not even sure you have a girl anymore. War is odd that way. People drift and sometimes letters fill in the gaps. Some nights there's no mail call. Other times it's a flood. You watch as men unfold papers with trembling hands. Some smiling, some going very still. One man reads his letter out loud. Another stares at his like it might disappear. Occasionally, someone gets bad news. They never tell you exactly what it says, but you see it in their eyes. And the manual is clear. Offer sympathy, but not intrusion. Maintain composure. Allow space. Even grief, apparently, has a dress code. There's one curious tradition no one admits out loud. If someone gets a scented letter, they pass it around. Silently, respectfully, so everyone can remember softness. You've seen it once. A note with faint rose water scent, written in pink ink, carefully passed from hand to hand. No one says a word. They just breathe it in, and for a moment, the mud doesn't matter. You start carrying blank stationery in your breast pocket. It gives you comfort, as if the potential for connection is as good as the real thing. One rainy morning, the mail clerk mutters something about a delay. The trucks were diverted. Maybe sabotage, maybe just bad planning. Either way, no letters today. You see a man fold himself smaller in the corner of the barracks. He'd been hoping for a reply from his wife. Last week, she wrote to say the baby had taken her first step. He reread that line until the paper nearly dissolved. You sit next to him. Don't say anything. Just pull out your blank page and start writing. Sometimes the best letter is the one you write and never send. You're crouched behind a pile of sandbags, the ground damp beneath you, the air thick with distant thunder that might be actual thunder or might be artillery. Either way, someone passes you a tin mug of lukewarm tea, and you sip it. Because that's what you do, apparently, even here. The manual doesn't technically have a section titled Tea Protocol in Active Combat Zones, but the spirit of it still floats through every interaction. There's something surreal about it all. You're wearing a helmet, a bayonet rests against your thigh, and your sergeant just used the phrase, "pinkies down," unless you're royalty. The British officers are especially intense about this. One of them, Major Grantham, sets up a proper tea station behind the barracks. Porcelain cups, a copper kettle, sugar cubes in a little silver bowl, in the middle of a scorched field. You think civilization collapses because of war? He says. No, it collapses when men forget how to serve tea properly. You raise your mug in a mock toast. He doesn't laugh. Of course not. There's a long-standing debate among historians about this peculiar obsession with tea. Some argue it was a morale tool, a grounding ritual in the face of chaos. Others claim it was a show of superiority, a performance of cultural resilience. One thing's for sure, no matter how dire the circumstances, tea is always available. You once saw a corporal make tea using rainwater collected in a helmet, filtered through a sock, and heated over a broken landmine. The taste? Hints of gunpowder, despair, and a surprising floral note. Not bad. You've learned the basic tea rules now, whether you like it or not. Milk after the tea, unless it's Earl Grey. No slurping, no swishing. Never comment on the strength unless it's to complement it. And never, never call it just hot water with leaves. One poor Canadian cadet made that joke. He now does latrine duty and answers to the nickname Lipton. Today's tea break happens under a camo tarp, while distant gunfire rolls through the trees. A group of officers sits around a folding table with mismatched cups and 3 kinds of biscuits, only one of which is edible. You know this from experience. The third one? Definitely designed as tank armor. You find your spot, cup in hand, and try to look relaxed. You're not. You're sweating, itchy, and your left boot has been making a squelching noise all day that no one will acknowledge. But here, during this ritual, everything pauses. The war presses its face against the glass, but doesn't come in. Someone passes around a tin of condensed milk. Someone else cracks a joke about Churchill's tea preferences, strong enough to stand a spoon in. You chuckle, even though you've heard that one 17 times. It's a small price to pay for the illusion of normalcy. Major Grantham insists on one rule: no war talk during tea, which is ironic, since the only thing on your mind is the map in the field tent showing red X's that seem a little too close to your position. But you honor the rule. Instead, you discuss literature, weather, and the proper pronunciation of scone. Cause is it scone to rhyme with stone, or scone to rhyme with gone? This argument has outlasted battles. You learn more about your fellow officers in these 10-minute breaks than in hours of marching. Their quirks, their memories, their fears, softly revealed between sips. Lieutenant Keats talks about his garden back home. Sergeant Patel shares that his grandmother taught him how to steep chai with cloves and cardamom, and swears by it as a cure for everything, including cowardice. You try it once. It makes your nose run and your hands tingle, but you feel oddly braver. Tea, you realize, isn't about the beverage. It's about the pause, the performance of control, the idea that no matter how mad the world gets, you can still boil water, pour it carefully, and discuss which biscuit crumbles least in milk. One evening, during a lull, you're invited to a more formal tea. White cloth on the table, a real teapot, a lemon slice balanced on a spoon like a trophy. There's even music playing from a scratchy phonograph, something light and string heavy. You take a seat and immediately stress about your posture. Here it's not just about taste, it's about presence. You're served by a junior officer who pours with the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred rituals. Your cup is filled precisely 2/3 of the way. No more, no less. You nod in gratitude, resisting the urge to joke. This is sacred ground now. There's a minor scandal when someone dips a biscuit into their tea and it breaks off. Silence falls. The offending officer attempts to fish it out with a spoon, then a knife, then a pencil. None work. Finally, he drinks around it with what can only be described as trench humility. Later that night, as you settle into your cot, you find a stain on your trousers, the result of a rogue splash from the teapot. You consider scrubbing it out immediately. There's a rule about uniform cleanliness, even during downtime, but instead, you smile. That stain means something. It means today, for 10 minutes, you were human. Back in the barracks, someone's posted a quote on the chalkboard. When you have lost everything, make tea. And if you still have sugar, count yourself a king. You don't know who wrote it. Maybe it's from the manual, maybe not. But tomorrow, when the sun rises over this uncertain patch of earth, and you're told to pack, move, run, you'll still find time for tea. Pinkies down. You're standing in front of a mirror the size of a shoebox, trying to decide whether your handkerchief looks like a subtle signal of respect or like a crumpled rag someone mistook for a flag of surrender. It's just a square of fabric. You shouldn't be thinking this hard. And yet, here you are, trying to remember the exact instructions. Fold once lengthwise, once again across, and then tucked into the left breast pocket. Tip upward at a 45-degree angle, unless attending a funeral, in which case, the tip must remain hidden. Yes, that's specific. You'd think a war wouldn't have room for such details, but in officer etiquette, everything has meaning, including, and sometimes especially, the handkerchief. It's referred to in the manual as the gentleman's silent ally. Chuffed, which sounds like it should be holding a revolver, not your sniffles. But there it is, a simple cloth that's supposed to reflect dignity, restraint, and readiness. Readiness to dab a brow, offer comfort to a lady, not that you've seen one in months, or to polish a pair of glasses during a tense negotiation with a colonel who smells faintly of brandy and distrust. There's an old story about a lieutenant who forgot his handkerchief during a dinner with the French ambassador. Someone sneezed, and in the absence of proper etiquette, the lieutenant panicked and used his napkin. Apparently, it was taken as a grave insult. Diplomatic relations stalled for a week. Historians still debate whether it was the sneeze or the linen that caused the delay. Either way, the napkin in question is reportedly framed in a museum somewhere. You carry 2 handkerchiefs now, one in your breast pocket, purely for display, starched like a chapel steeple. The second, in your back pocket, functional, folded but not ironed, the one you actually use. You learn the secret. Never let them see you use the first one. It's a symbol, not a tool. One day, you're called into a minor meeting with a visiting general. You're nervous, sure, but mostly you're sweating, and you can feel the sheen starting to form on your forehead like dew on a battlefield. You reach, out of reflex, for the breast pocket, and then you freeze. No, not that one, not in front of him. Instead, you shift, ever so subtly, and let your hand drift to your hip. From your back pocket, the working cloth emerges. You dab discreetly. No one notices, but you know. You passed the test. Another curious detail? Color. The handbook insists on white or cream. No patterns, no embroidery, except perhaps your initials in a modest corner. Once, a Scottish officer showed up with a plaid kerchief, and you would have thought he'd declared war on proper taste. He never lived it down. For weeks, cadets addressed him as Captain Picnic. There's also a superstition, at least among the older officers, that offering your handkerchief to someone wounded is a sign of deep respect, and possibly bad luck. You're giving them part of your name, one man mutters, handing over a bloodied cloth to the medic, and hoping they live long enough to return it. You're not sure if it's poetic or just bleak. Maybe both. The most awkward use of the handkerchief comes during parades. You've seen it yourself. An officer, overcome by heat or the slow crumble of dignity, pulls it out and pats their face like royalty in distress. But there's a method. Not dabbing too often, not too aggressively. No flapping, and absolutely no ringing. You are not a fishmonger. Then there's the signal theory. According to a sergeant major who claims he served with intelligence during the North African campaign, certain folds of the handkerchief once indicated covert messages. Folded into a triangle and held in the left hand, rendezvous at dusk. Rolled tight and pinned in the front pocket, danger near. Folded flat with a corner peeking out just so, the colonel is drunk again. Historians mostly dismiss these as folklore, but every time you see a particularly crisp handkerchief, you wonder, what's it really saying? And yet, the strangest handkerchief-related moment happens during a training ceremony. A young recruit, nervous, sweating, clearly out of his depth, stands before the reviewing officer. His uniform is impeccable, his boots shine like mirrors, and his handkerchief, bright yellow. Someone gasps. The colonel raises a brow. No words are exchanged. But the next day, the recruit's reassigned to kitchen prep, far from the eyes of the ceremonial crowd. You later learn he just grabbed the wrong cloth in the rush to get dressed. Wrong fabric, wrong message. And in this world, that's enough to change your trajectory. Still, you can't help but laugh, quietly, because somewhere between folding uniforms and memorizing saluting angles, you have become a man who judges people by their handkerchiefs. A week later, you find yourself offering your working kerchief to a fellow cadet who's just received a tough letter. He doesn't take it, just nods. But you leave it beside him anyway. That night, you find it folded neatly on your cot. There's no note, just a clean crease and the faint scent of lavender. The silent ally speaks again. You're polishing your boots in a small antechamber that smells faintly of furniture wax, regret, and desperation when the adjutant announces, "Formal ball? Friday evening? Dress uniforms? Attendance mandatory." Your first thought is finally, a break from the mud. Your second thought is, I haven't danced since my cousin's wedding, and I stepped on the cake. The military ball, as described in the etiquette manual, is a vital exercise in interpersonal elegance and representational decorum, which is a long-winded way of saying, don't make a fool of yourself in front of the general's wife, or his daughter, or his dog, if it happens to be attending. You arrive at the event looking like someone else entirely. Your dress blues are so sharply pressed they might be a weapon. Your shoes reflect not just your face, but your anxieties. The building is decked out in wartime grandeur. Paper garlands, dim bulbs pretending to be chandeliers, and an actual string quartet playing a slightly off-tempo rendition of Moonlight Serenade. The dance floor is a minefield, not the kind you trained for. You line up with the other officers like you're about to charge the enemy. Except this time, the enemy is a cluster of civilians, dignitaries, and women in silk gloves who look like they read 5 books a week, and will notice if you place your left hand a centimeter too high, and then she appears. Not she as in fate or romance, but she as in the admiral's daughter. You don't know how you know it's her. Maybe it's the way everyone avoids her with quiet reverence. Maybe it's because her poodle is wearing a medal. Maybe it's just a feeling. You're introduced. Her name is something regal and lightly terrifying. Clarissa, perhaps? You bow slightly. She extends a gloved hand. You take it. You dance. And suddenly, your entire military career hinges on not crushing her toes. There's a rhythm to military ballroom etiquette. It's not just about movement, it's about presence. You must lead, but not dominate. Glide, not gallop. Smile, but not leer. Engage, but never overshare. And above all, remember, left hand out, right hand gently placed. Keep your frame. Mind the tempo. Your instructor once said dancing teaches you to lead without barking orders. That the battlefield requires clarity, but the ballroom requires grace. You thought it was nonsense. Now you're not so sure. Clarissa, or whatever her real name is good. Too good. You think she might be leading you. You catch yourself counting steps. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. While she chats effortlessly about rationing and the scandal involving the Belgian colonel and the chocolate shipment. You nod, you laugh in the right places, and somehow you survive the first song, then the second. And that's when it happens. You step too wide. She stumbles. You try to recover. Too fast. Her heel catches. She wobbles. And suddenly both of you are very much not dancing. Time slows. You picture the court-martial. The headline, Officer injures naval heiress during Charleston. But then she laughs. Not a polite chuckle. A real laugh, bright, sharp, honest. And just like that, the room relaxes. I like that you don't pretend to be perfect, she says. You bow again, sheepishly. I aim for barely functional, you reply. She offers another dance. You take it. This time, slower, more careful. And by the third song, you're no longer worried about the manual. You're worried about when this night will end. You glance around the ballroom and realize you're not the only one fighting invisible battles. One officer is desperately trying to recall the name of his partner's father. Another is silently mouthing the beat. Someone else is sweating through his epaulets. It's not just about dancing, it's diplomacy. It's poise under pressure. It's proving you can be more than a barking command in a muddy trench. There's an old tale, half legend, half joke, about a lieutenant who tangoed so skillfully with a Brazilian ambassador's wife that an entire trade deal was salvaged. Historians debate its validity, but the story persists, passed down with winks and questionable footwork. Later that night, you find yourself alone near the punch table. The bowl is mostly empty, the contents suspiciously pink. The poodle is asleep under a chair. Clarissa approaches with 2 cups. You didn't step on me, she says. You nod. I stepped near you. Close enough. She grins. You're better than most. You smile, slightly stunned. You drink the punch. It's fizzy, mysterious, and may contain peaches. Outside, the music fades. Inside, something lingers. That night, you fold your uniform with care. Not just because it's regulation, but because today, it meant something more. You danced, you faltered, you recovered, and the world, at least for a few hours, was kind. It's 4:50 a.m., and you're shaving. Not in a tiled bathroom. Not with steam rising and a towel waiting on a warm rack. No, you're crouched near a frozen stream, your knees digging into frosted earth, your mirror a dented piece of polished metal, and your razor a single battered blade that might have seen action in the previous war. There's a rule in the manual, bolded and underlined. An officer's face must be clean-shaven at all times, regardless of environment. There's even a story of a major who was shot in the leg and still requested a shave before being evacuated. Priorities. And so, here you are, your fingers numb, your breath visible, and your cheeks scraped raw from yesterday's attempt. You splash water on your face, water so cold it might have come directly from a glacier, or the disappointed gaze of your commanding officer. The sting wakes you faster than any bugle ever could. You lather up with a stub of shaving soap that smells vaguely of citrus and punishment. No brush. You lost that 2 weeks ago during a particularly aggressive drill, when someone tackled your kit for realism. The blade touches skin, and it's less a glide and more of a negotiation. You've nicked yourself twice before even reaching your jawline. And still, you persist. Why? Because shaving isn't just hygiene out here. It's survival. Not from the enemy, but from reprimand, ridicule, and a kind of slow institutional disappointment that leaves no scars but lasts forever. A corporal once went 3 days without shaving. On the 4th, he was pulled from roll call, handed a straight razor, and told to shave until I see my future in your cheeks. You don't even know what that means, but it worked. He hasn't missed a day since. You finish one cheek. Small victory. Your reflection grimaces back at you. You look older, or maybe just colder. You miss hot water. You miss mirrors that aren't concave. You miss not having to shave outside while wild boars lurk somewhere in the brush. Still, you keep going. There's something absurdly noble about the ritual. You could be bombed today, ambushed, transferred. But for now, you're a man with a blade and a goal. Decency. Shaving in the field becomes an art. You learn tricks. Heat the blade briefly with a match to reduce the shock. Use the underside of your mess tin for a smoother reflection. Always shave with the grain, unless you want your neck to look like a topographical map of failure. And you learn to not complain, at least not out loud. That's part of the etiquette, too. There's a section titled Discomfort and the Graceful Management Thereof. A fancy way of saying, suck it up, buttercup. Some days you gather around the campfire and joke about it. Who got the worst cut? Who bled the most? Who once shaved during an artillery drill because they had a date with a nurse who never showed up? One officer claims he shaves not just for protocol, but because if they find my body, I want them to say, he died with a clean chin. He says it with a smile. You're not sure if it's a joke. Probably not. There's another unspoken rule. If someone runs out of shaving cream, you share. Not because you like them, but because you're all part of the same strange ballet of blades and bravado. It's solidarity, sharpened and scented. Occasionally, you see someone sporting a bit of stubble, usually a new recruit. They're gently reminded, sometimes not so gently. A lieutenant once handed a fresh recruit a used razor and said, "You want to be a man? Start with this." Harsh? Yes, but effective. The recruit never missed again. And then there's the mustache debate. Technically, they're allowed. Neatly trimmed, non-obstructive, and consistent with uniform dignity. But most officers avoid them. Too risky. Too easily misunderstood. One captain had a thin, curled mustache that made him look like a villain from an operetta. He was deeply respected, but also feared. Mostly because you couldn't tell if he was about to order a charge or perform in a cabaret. You tried growing one once. It lasted 3 days before a sergeant said you looked like a squirrel with ambitions. That was the end of that. By now, your face is half-shaved, your hands trembling, and your jaw clenched like a soldier in a portrait. You finish the job, dabbing a few cuts with the edge of your undershirt. There's blood. Of course there's blood. You wipe your blade, tuck it into its cloth, and stand up. You don't feel better, but you feel ready. The sun hasn't risen yet. The forest is silent, except for the distant hum of morning routines, the metallic clink of mess kits, the low murmur of voices reciting orders, and the occasional curse word from someone discovering their socks froze overnight. You walk back to camp. A private salutes you. You nod. No one comments on your chin. That's how you know you did it right. That night, as you clean your razor under dim light, someone asks, "Why do we bother?" You glance at him, blade in hand. "Because even if we lose the war," you say, "we'll look good doing it." He laughs. And for once, so do you. You're in a dusty barn in the middle of France, seated at a long wooden table beneath a swaying lantern. Around you, the air smells of straw, mildew, and faintly of gunpowder. Someone just popped open a dusty bottle of wine that may or may not predate the First World War. And you're expected to swirl it, not chug, not grimace, swirl. Welcome to wartime wine etiquette. You glance at your glass. It's chipped. The wine inside is dark, almost black, and carries the aroma of, well, something. Possibly vinegar, possibly victory. It's hard to tell. The manual refers to this situation, though not directly, as occasions of celebratory libation in occupied or liberated territory. Translation: We just took this village back, and now we're celebrating without embarrassing the uniform. The French liaison officer gives a short speech. Everyone claps. Then he begins pouring, reverently, like the wine itself is holy. Each glass gets a half pour, no more. To fill to the brim would be gauche, disrespectful. Also, it leaves no room to swirl. And apparently, swirling is everything. So you swirl. Not too fast. You're not trying to create a vortex. Just enough to coat the sides of the glass. Release the bouquet, which you pretend to detect. Hints of plum, someone says beside you. You nod. Also, maybe ash? He laughs. Or is that just the barn? Probably the barn. The act of tasting comes next. Not drinking, tasting. That means lifting the glass gently. No smudging the rim, taking a small sip, and letting it settle on the tongue. You do this. You detect something. Earthy, a little acidic. Possibly the taste of survival. Possibly mold. And yet, it's glorious. Because it isn't about the wine. It's about the pause. The moment. The shared ritual that says, we made it through another day. And for this one evening, we can pretend to be men of leisure instead of men of war. There's an old joke among officers that Churchill once judged a man's trustworthiness by how he held a wine glass. Too firm, unrefined, too loose, unstable, just right. Promotion material. No one knows if it's true, but everyone's too nervous to test it. One captain you know insists on using his own corkscrew, carries it in his kit, claims it was a gift from a French widow he helped during the retreat from Dunkirk. The corkscrew has initials etched into the handle. You ask about them. He just smiles and says, a story for another day. Tonight there's food, not much. A few hunks of bread, some hard cheese, and a roasted bird of uncertain origin. But with the wine, it tastes like royalty. You raise a glass to the village elder, who stands nearby, solemn in a patched jacket, watching the soldiers drink with the careful optimism of someone who's hosted this scene before. Toasts begin, quiet at first. A salute to comrades not present, to the town, to the wine, to the people who made it. Then a young lieutenant, clearly a little too enthusiastic, stands and proclaims a toast to France and to kissing French girls. You wince. The elder coughs. The senior officer doesn't scold him. He simply raises an eyebrow and says, perhaps just to France. That's the etiquette here. Unspoken but firm. Humor is allowed. Crudeness is not. Emotion is allowed. Self-indulgence is not. There's a thin line between celebration and spectacle, and crossing it means losing the dignity the ritual is meant to restore. You notice another man quietly wiping the base of his glass before setting it down. That's regulation. No ring marks left on borrowed furniture, even if that furniture is a lopsided table in a barn where chickens occasionally wander through. Wine etiquette also includes the silent art of refusal. If someone offers you a refill and you don't want it, you don't just wave them off. You cover the top of your glass lightly with your fingers and offer a slight smile, a gesture that says, thank you, but no more. To deny a second pour too quickly is considered rude. To accept a third might suggest you've lost control, and control, as always, is the goal. Somewhere near midnight, someone uncorks a second bottle, this one older, darker, and with a label so worn it might as well be ancient. You sip it slowly, and for a brief moment, you taste something you can't name. Not just plum, not just oak, but time itself. There's a tale, told with reverence and a little exaggeration, of an American officer who drank with a French winemaker during the Liberation and commented on the soul of the wine. The winemaker supposedly wept. Whether it happened or not, no one's sure. But every time someone raises a glass in a foreign land, they try to summon just enough poetry to be remembered. You start to get it. The ceremony, the sips, the smiles. It's not about what's in the bottle. It's about proving you're still civilized. That war hasn't turned you feral. That you can still sit down, raise a glass, and speak with elegance, even if your boots are muddy and your heart is raw. As the evening winds down, you carry your glass outside and sit on a wooden crate. The stars are out, cold and sharp. You sip the last of the wine slowly, savoring the bitter notes. Around you, laughter fades into murmurs. Someone hums an old tune. A dog barks in the distance. And you think, we will probably be gone by morning. But tonight, we drank with dignity. You place the glass on the ground, careful not to tip it. Then you go to bed, slightly warmer than usual. You stand near a cluster of diplomats and officers in a lavishly lit reception hall, pretending to admire a painting you can't quite identify. Possibly Napoleon, possibly someone who just really enjoyed standing on a cliff. This isn't the field. This is peacetime theater. A cocktail party in wartime, dressed in silk and whispers. Your uniform is flawless. Your hair is perfectly combed. And your mission tonight? Make pleasant conversation, avoid saying anything that could cause an international incident, and, above all, understand the unspoken code. The manual refers to this type of event as a formal reception with strategic intermingling, which is code for half party, half espionage, all etiquette. You're handed a glass with something pale and fizzy. The drink barely matters. What matters is how you hold it. Not too high, nervous, not too low, disengaged. Elbow relaxed, wrists neutral, thumb not pointing like you're making finger guns. You learned that lesson last month. You nod politely as a British colonel tells a story involving a camel, 2 chess pieces, and something classified. Everyone chuckles at the punchline, though no one truly understands it. Doesn't matter. The mood is the message. Then someone passes you a small plate of canapés. And now the real challenge begins. There's a specific way to eat at these things. 1 bite. No chewing like a goat. And always, always, napkin before fingers. A junior officer once licked sauce off his knuckle. He was politely relocated to inventory management for the remainder of the season. The strange thing about these parties is how quiet they are, not in volume, but in intent. Conversations float on surface tension. How long will you be stationed here? Have you tried the veal? Fascinating weather for February. Translation: what's your clearance? What are you hiding? Are you listening closely enough to the man 2 feet behind you? And sometimes, the most important information isn't spoken at all. That's where code words come in. Officially, they're not used in social settings. Unofficially, they're everywhere. You're told, before the event, to listen for odd phrases. Picking up the napkin might mean the exit is compromised. I prefer the mustard, could indicate a planned extraction. And the most dramatic of all, the garden is well trimmed, means leave immediately and don't finish your drink. You're skeptical at first, but then you hear it. A Romanian officer leans in and says, "We don't shake hands on Sundays." You blink. You excuse yourself, check your reflection in a framed mirror, and casually make your way to the hallway, where a fellow liaison nods once and whispers, "Message received. Don't mention the ambassador's son." Right, understood. Back inside, the party carries on. You realize something else. These events are tests, not of strength, but of composure. How well can you carry a conversation with someone who might be feeding you misinformation? Can you notice the shifting body language when an officer switches from English to French to Italian in mid-sentence? Can you politely change the subject when a guest brings up classified troop movements with a bit too much curiosity? And perhaps the strangest etiquette rule of the night: never stand still for too long. Movement implies confidence. Stillness suggests eavesdropping. You're expected to orbit the room like a satellite, collecting snippets of dialogue, sharing smiles, and occasionally complimenting someone's tie, even if it resembles a tablecloth. You get good at this. Too good. By the end of the evening, you've learned which guests have security clearance, who's allergic to shellfish, and who once fainted during a toast and now compulsively grips every champagne flute with both hands. There's a toast at midnight. Formal, Crisp. The host thanks everyone for attending. The glasses rise. You lift yours. 3 seconds after the general does. Perfect timing. You take a small sip, never a full gulp. Then you scan the room, and your eyes catch a woman in a navy dress. Civilian, quiet, observing. You think you recognize her from the intelligence briefing 2 weeks ago, the one about intercepted messages and a vanished courier. She smiles faintly. You nod. She disappears into the crowd. And just like that, you're reminded. This is not just a party. It never was. Later, you're offered a cigar. Declining takes as much finesse as accepting. The key is to do so gracefully, as if you're abstaining out of refined personal conviction, not panic at the idea of coughing in front of a foreign dignitary. You settle on, tempting, but I think more clearly without the fog. The general smiles. A rare sentiment. Wise. You're pretty sure you just passed a test you didn't know you were taking. When the night finally ends, you step out into the cool air, your collar slightly askew, your back sore from perfect posture, your head spinning, not from the wine, but from the ballet of diplomacy, theater, and etiquette that somehow held it all together. And the manual's final advice for receptions? Leave with grace. Never rush. Let the night end before it begins to unravel. So you walk slowly, down the marble steps, past the guards, into the night, and behind you, the music still plays. You're sitting alone at a desk made from a shipping crate, with a dull pencil in hand and a blank sheet of paper that somehow feels heavier than your rifle. Outside, the wind howls through the cracks in the walls. Inside, the silence is thicker than usual, because tonight, you're writing a death letter. Officially, they're called letters of notification. Unofficially, they're one of the cruelest acts of etiquette the manual ever demands from you. A whole chapter is devoted to it, on composure and compassion in loss. You remember reading it weeks ago, thinking, hope I never have to do that. And now here you are. The manual tells you to begin with acknowledgement, then lead into condolences. It says to offer dignity, to recount bravery, to spare the reader the brutal truth unless absolutely necessary. It says to write with the calm of an officer and the heart of a friend. But what if you don't feel calm? The man you're writing about was in your unit. He once traded his last chocolate bar for a clean pair of socks. He sang off-key, but always sang. He made everyone laugh during inspections by imitating a Scottish general with a broom for a mustache. And now you're supposed to condense all that into a paragraph, 2 at most. The manual suggests you avoid words like killed, too abrupt, too cold, better, passed in the line of duty, or fell while serving his country. You write both versions. You stare at them, you erase them, you settle on, he gave his life protecting others. True, not the whole truth, but enough. You're also told to include a memory, a moment that reminds the family that their son, their brother, their husband wasn't just a statistic in a telegram. But which one? The time he snored so loudly a fox ran off? The time he built a snowman with a bayonet just to lighten the mood? None of it seems big enough. So you write, he always knew how to lift spirits, even when the sky was falling. His presence brought light to our darkest days. You pause. You let the sentence breathe. The wind pushes against the window like it wants to come in and finish the letter for you. You wonder what his mother's face will look like when she reads this. If she'll cry immediately or hold it in. If she'll keep the letter folded in a drawer or read it once and throw it into the fire. And that's the part they don't prepare you for. The etiquette teaches you what to say, but not what to feel. You sign your name carefully. No flourish, just your full name and rank. You don't include your nickname. You don't say, I'm sorry, too many times. You say it once, and you make it count. Some officers dictate these letters. Others delegate them. But in your camp, the rule is, if he fell under your command, you write it yourself. No exceptions. There's an old tale of a general in the Pacific Theater who handwrote over 600 letters, one for each man lost in his division. No one knows how he did it. Historians debate whether it's even possible, but those who served with him say he cried only once. After the last envelope was sealed, you fold the letter. You slide it into a plain envelope. You write the address slowly, double-checking each line. And then, the worst part, you place it in the outgoing box and walk away. You don't linger. That's another rule. Once written, do not revisit. The letter must carry your certainty, not your sorrow. And yet, hours later, you return to the box. You don't open it. You just look at it, like maybe it might dissolve. It doesn't. In the barracks, a few others are doing the same thing. Quiet, staring at the box. No one says it, but you know, they've written their letters too. One man sits in the corner, holding a sealed envelope in his lap. He hasn't put it in yet. He's whispering something. Maybe a prayer, maybe a goodbye. Eventually, he stands, walks over and drops it in like it weighs 1,000 pounds. You later learn some men keep copies, not for duty, for memory, as if the words could tether the fallen to the living. And every time a letter is returned, marked undeliverable, it stays locked in the chaplain's cabinet. No one throws them away. There's even a poem taped to the inside of the cabinet door. If no eyes receive this, let no eyes forget. He was here. He mattered. He is written. You don't know who wrote it, but you carry those lines with you. The next morning, the mail truck comes. The driver takes the outgoing pouch. You nod at him. He nods back. And that's it. The letter is gone, on its way. You button your coat, straighten your collar, and walk toward the field where your unit is waiting. No one says a word, but they all notice your silence. Rain is falling again. Not the kind that refreshes, the kind that soaks through your bones, through your soul, through whatever bits of you haven't already been turned into uniform and habit. Your socks squish in your boots. Your jacket clings to you like wet canvas. And still, you march. Because it's raining, but you're not allowed to act like it's raining. This is where the real art of military etiquette reveals itself. Not in salons or ceremonies, but in the mud, in how you carry yourself when everything in you wants to collapse into a puddle. They call it the stiff upper lip. The manual dedicates an entire section to it, page 213 if you recall, titled with painful optimism, on maintaining composure in adverse weather and adversity. Adversity, that's what they call a 9-mile march in full gear during a storm that would make Noah reconsider his carpentry hobby. You're soaked. Everyone is. One man lost a boot in the mud 3 miles back and just kept walking. Another has a cold so bad he's leaking from every orifice. And still he's humming Tipperary under his breath. You want to punch him, but you're too tired. What keeps you upright? The rhythm, the rules, the deep, ridiculous belief that how you march through misery matters. You remember what the captain said last week? You're not just training your legs, you are training your character. You wanted to roll your eyes. But now, your legs hurt, your back aches, and yet, somehow, you're still in step. And weirdly proud of it. The man next to you stumbles. You don't laugh. You don't even flinch. You adjust your pace. Let him recover and continue. That's etiquette, too. It's not just about forks and toasts. It's how you treat each other when everything's broken, when no one's watching, when all that holds you together is respect and muscle memory. And then there's the socks. Yes, socks. Possibly the most discussed item in all of officer folklore. The manual insists they be rotated, dried, folded precisely. Because trench foot isn't just unpleasant, it's preventable. And if your men see you walking around with soggy, flapping socks, what will they think? There's even a story, half legend, half warning, about a young officer who ignored sock protocol. His men followed suit. Within a week, 6 were hobbling, 1 was hospitalized, and the officer was reassigned to supply cataloging in Greenland. You don't want Greenland. So every night, no matter how tired you are, you peel off your socks, wring them out like a dish rag from hell, and lay them over your cot's edge like tiny flags of survival. And the next morning, you put them on again. Because they're dryish. And because the act of putting them on properly is the closest thing to comfort you've got. Your bunkmate has a sock drying technique that involves a mess tin, a heated stone, and what looks like a prayer to an old Roman god. You don't question it. His socks are always warm. You envy him. There's a phrase passed among officers: "We are only as strong as our cleanest pair." You think it's a joke. Then you see a colonel inspecting socks during a surprise barracks visit. He doesn't say a word, just picks up a pair, sniffs it, and walks out. That night, everyone launders like their lives depend on it. You start keeping a spare pair tucked inside your helmet, dry, folded, wrapped in a handkerchief like a relic. You don't plan to wear them. You just want to know they exist, that at any moment you could experience the miracle of warm, dry socks. Sometimes, in the middle of a storm, that's all the hope you need. Back to the march. Your boots squish again. A bird overhead mocks you with a cheerful chirp. You fantasize about desertion, tropical islands, and indoor plumbing. Then the sergeant yells, "Eyes forward, chins up," and you obey. Because that's the etiquette. You keep your chin up, even when your face is numb and your boots feel like aquariums. You nod to civilians on the road, even when they pretend not to see you. You march in step, rain be damned. Because discipline is not about comfort, it's about consistency. You reach a bend in the road. The wind shifts. The rain slants. A truck drives by, splashing everyone with an extra layer of insult. You barely blink. You're soaked. You're miserable. And still, you keep marching. There's dignity in that. A quiet one. One day, when the war is just a set of memories boxed in old letters and blurry photographs, you'll remember this feeling. The exhaustion, the wet, the ache, but also the calm, the stillness inside that comes from knowing you didn't stop. You kept going. You look at your reflection in a puddle. You barely recognize the man staring back, but he's upright, and his chin still up. You're seated at a folding table inside a tent that smells of damp canvas and ceremonial dust. The mood is quiet. No fanfare, no shouting, just the uncomfortable shuffle of boots and the occasional cough. Outside, flags flutter. Inside, no one makes eye contact. Why? Because today's lesson isn't about victory. It's about how to surrender properly. There's a chapter in the manual titled "Grace Under Defeat," the etiquette of capitulation. You laughed when you first saw it. Who plans for surrender? Now you realize the military plans for everything, especially the moments you pray never happen. The instructor, a wiry major with the demeanor of a disappointed librarian, paces slowly. You do not cry. You do not rage. You do not bargain. You surrender with your chin up and your buttons aligned. He's not joking. There's protocol. And of course, there is. The enemy may have your weapons, your position, but they must never take your dignity. That's the underlying idea. You're not just representing yourself. You're the last echo of your flag. It begins with the approach. Hands visible, hat off. Uniform clean if possible. White cloth? Optional. The key is posture. Back straight, expression neutral, pace even. You are a representative of your army, not a groveling mess, the manual says. You're told never to kneel, never to crawl, never to drop your weapon like it's on fire. Instead, place it down slowly, deliberately. A symbolic act, a statement. I fought, I lost, but I am not broken. It's almost poetic, if it weren't so terrifying. There's a curious section that details what not to say during surrender. No apologies, no sarcasm, no last-minute negotiation attempts, and definitely no movie one-liners. Apparently, during WWII, an officer surrendered with the words, "Guess I'll be seeing you in hell." He was shot on the spot. Historians debate whether that was justified or simply poor timing. You're even taught how to bow. Not deeply, that's submission. Just enough to acknowledge your opponent. A tilt, a nod, a quiet offering of mutual respect in the wake of ruin. There's another rule. Don't blame your men, even if they panicked, even if the lines collapsed, even if someone dropped a grenade at the worst possible moment. You take responsibility. That's the code. That's leadership. That's what separates officers from everyone else. The manual calls it ethical surrender. You call it swallowing fire with a straight face. One officer recounts a story, whether true or not, no one knows, of a British commander in North Africa who, when surrounded, offered his sword to the opposing general with the words, "I regret only that I cannot offer you my tea set as well." They say the enemy general laughed and returned the sword. Again, no proof. But the story survives because it's the kind of moment soldiers want to believe in. Still, not all surrenders are so tidy. Sometimes there is chaos, confusion, dust and smoke and half-barked commands. And even then, etiquette insists you hold the line. Not the physical line, but the emotional one. You do not beg. You do not collapse. You present yourself. Even your final salute has rules. If given the opportunity, you're to salute the opposing commander. Short, precise, eyes forward. One officer said it's like handing someone the keys to your house while pretending the windows aren't broken. But here's the thing, no one tells you. Sometimes, surrender isn't to the enemy. Sometimes it's to the moment, to the understanding that bravery isn't always standing tall. It's knowing when to lower your weapon without lowering your worth. You run through the drills, practice the walk, the weapon drop, the nod. It feels absurd, like a funeral rehearsal for a version of you that hasn't died yet. And yet as you do it, something unexpected happens. You feel calmer, not because you plan to use any of this, but because deep down, you know, if that day comes, you won't face it with chaos. You'll face it with composure. That's the gift etiquette gives in war. It doesn't save your life, but it shapes the story of how you faced the end. Later, during a quiet meal, you talk with another officer. Would you actually salute the enemy? You ask. He shrugs. If he deserves it, and if he doesn't, a pause. Then, I salute who I am, not who he is. You remember that. You write it down, and then you fold your napkin, triangle, not square, tip facing away, and carry on with your day. Because until that moment ever comes, you're still here, still standing, still learning how to face the world with your shoulders back and your jaw set. Not because you're fearless, but because you've been taught how to fall with style. The war is over, or at least that's what they're saying. You're back on friendly soil, standing in a drawing room that smells faintly of polished wood and good intentions. There's champagne in a flute someone handed you without asking. There are men in suits, women in dresses, and a pianist in the corner playing something soft and forgettable. And you're trying to remember how to be a person. It's strange. After all the drills, the salutes, the perfectly folded handkerchiefs, you thought this part would be easy. But peace, it turns out, comes with its own kind of pressure, especially when it's your turn to give the toast. You clear your throat. The room quiets. You look down at your glass, then up at the expectant faces, and suddenly, you remember what the etiquette manual says about this moment. In peace, as in war, the words of an officer must be measured, intentional, and modest. A toast is not a speech. It is a gesture. It is a bridge. So you lift your glass. To the ones who made it back, to the ones who didn't, and to the quiet hope that we all find our way home. It's not poetry, but it's honest. The glasses clink. The room breathes again. You exhale. Later, someone pulls you aside to compliment your composure. You nod politely, resisting the urge to laugh, because what you really wanted to do was drop the glass and disappear into the nearest hedge. But instead, you smiled. You stood straight. You remembered your post-war etiquette. That's right. There's a whole chapter for this, tucked near the back of the manual like a secret epilogue. Behavior in civilian celebrations, honors, and gatherings. It covers everything from how to handle interviews to which fork to use during award dinners. Still the outside-in method. Some things never change. You're warned never to speak of the battlefield in detail. Not the blood, not the noise, not the smell. Speak of brotherhood, of duty, of pride. Let silence carry the weight you cannot voice. And so you do. When asked what it was like, you say, "We kept each other warm." When asked if you were scared, you say, "Only when I wasn't busy." You become a master of the acceptable anecdote. The humorous story about misfiring a flare gun. The harmless tale of the sergeant who believed pigeons were spies. The quirky moment when a general tried to use a bayonet to slice cheese. You skip the part where you had to carry a man's body through knee-deep mud while pretending you didn't hear him whisper. No one wants that story. Not tonight. What they want is your presence, not your trauma. There's a retired ambassador who insists on shaking your hand. He tells you he lost a brother in the First War. He doesn't say anything else, just holds your hand a little longer than necessary, nods, and walks away. That, too, is etiquette. There are also rules about where you sit at these events. Never at the head of the table unless invited, never first to eat, always last to leave. You're not a guest of honor. You're a symbol, and symbols don't get second helpings. You notice your fellow officers have changed. One still walks like he's dodging mortars. Another calls everyone "sir" out of habit. A third silently folds his napkin into a triangle before placing it on the table. A gesture so automatic it might as well be breathing. These things stay with you. That's something the manual doesn't say, but you learn it anyway. The etiquette never really leaves, even when the war does. One moment in particular haunts you, quietly, gently. A woman at the party drops her purse. Coins scatter. A compact clatters. You're the first to react, kneeling to gather the items, placing them gently on her palm. She smiles and says, "That was very gallant of you." You nod, not sure how to respond. Because gallantry was a word you used for carrying stretchers, for passing out tea under fire, for holding your breath in the mud while someone screamed nearby. But now, it's about purses and politeness. And not knocking over the centerpiece when you reach for the bread. The manual ends with a quote you once thought was pompous. When peace arrives, let it find you polished. You get it now. Not because peace demands perfection, but because it demands a version of you that people can sit next to, raise a glass with, and not feel afraid of. So you polish your shoes. You iron your collar. You give the toast. And when the music starts, and someone asks you to dance, you take their hand, left out, right in place, and step forward into something like a second life. You're home now, not just geographically, but technically. There's a roof over your head, a table you can eat at without watching for falling debris, a bed that doesn't double as a coffin during air raids. But the strangest thing of all is this: you miss the manual, not the war, not the dirt, not the food, certainly not the food, but the rules, the structure, the comfort of knowing that someone, somewhere, had already considered the absurdity of folding a blanket during a blitz, and still decided, yes, fold it anyway. Tonight, you find yourself in the attic, sorting through boxes. There, nestled between old photographs and a shaving kit that somehow survived it all, is the thing you didn't realize you were looking for. The Manual of Officer Conduct and Etiquette. Faded, creased, taped along the spine. Smells faintly of damp tobacco and history. You run your fingers over the cover, remembering. You open to a random page. When offering condolences, do not clasp both of the recipient's hands unless invited. A single hand, lightly held, with eye contact, suffices. You nod. You remember doing exactly that. Twice. Once successfully, once not. You flip again. In celebratory settings, an officer should always defer the first toast unless explicitly asked. Check. And then you find a page marked with the corner dog-eared, scribbled with pencil. Your handwriting. Messy. Sleep-deprived. It reads, "Do not confuse silence with dignity. Speak when needed. Listen always." You smile? You don't even remember writing it, but it sounds like you. The manual, you realize, wasn't just about posture and forks and salutes. It was a mirror, one that reflected the man you were trying to become, the man who kept shaving in the rain, who passed the wine with a steady hand, who saluted with pride, even when no one was watching. And now, in a quiet house miles from the front, you wonder if it still applies. Turns out, it does, because etiquette at its core is about grace. And grace, you've learned, is most useful after the war ends, when no one's ordering you to behave, but you choose to anyway. A friend stops by. You offer him tea. You don't think twice about how you pour it. Milk after, not before. He doesn't notice, but you do. At a wedding reception, someone forgets your name. You smile, reintroduce yourself, and say, "Don't worry, I forget who I am sometimes too." Laughter, relief, a flicker of ease. You're living the final chapter of the manual, the one no one writes. The chapter where you carry all the rules quietly inside you, no longer to impress anyone, but because they help the world make sense. One evening, you pull the manual from the shelf. You place it on the dining table. Your niece, just 12, picks it up and asks, "What's this?" You think for a long time before answering. It's a way to remember who you are, even when everything around you falls apart. She nods, pretending to understand. She flips through the pages, then carefully puts it back, like it's fragile. And you realize that maybe, just maybe, someone else will need it one day. For now, it stays on the shelf, a little dusty, a little weathered, but still folded properly. And now, it's time to let it all go. You've walked through the drills, the dinners, the dances, the downpours. You've kept your chin up, your boots dry, well, mostly, and your honor intact through page after page of rules that somehow held back the chaos. And now, the manual is closed, but its weight lingers in your hands. Not heavy exactly, just solid, like something lived in, something earned. So take a breath, let the noise fall away. Let the marching fade, the silverware clink dissolve into silence. The crisp salute melt into a simple nod of peace. No commands now, no inspections, no codes to memorize or laces to realign. Just you, here, in this moment. The only etiquette now is the quiet one. To be still, to rest, to know that whatever rules you had to learn to survive, you're allowed now to just be. To sleep deeply, without the weight of posture or posture's expectations. To release the protocols, and feel the warmth of your own rhythm return. Somewhere, far away, a kettle whistles. A light is dimmed. The world turns slowly, but for you, it slows even more. You're safe, you're home, and everything, even the wrinkles in the sheets, is exactly where it should be. Sweet dreams,